So I titled this Parent Provider Professional and Professional, and it's really about how we change the narrative around parenting and supporting people with disabilities. So, as Scott said, my name is Sarah Millimen. I'm the CEO of Riverview Industries, RVI, and I like to add in there professional hot mess and spacey moms. So I mentioned this earlier in the comments. I have 5 children, the oldest of which is 7, and the youngest, which is 6 weeks. I think he's 6 weeks, maybe 7 weeks. I don't remember right now. See, spacey mom. So bear with me. A lot of this is personal stories that I just like to share, and it will all make sense in the end. Hopefully, that's the goal. And yeah, so let's kind of get started. First off, I do like to give just a little warning. Some of the things I talk about in this presentation may be hard to hear. I talk a little bit about of my experiences and some of the things that have made it hard to navigate the system and hard to kind of move forward. I do talk about death a couple times. So if any of that is difficult for you to hear, absolutely take care of yourself first, and make sure that you're okay. So I do like to say that. So I started off in this field really by accident. I started off in this field by accident. So at 18, I decided I was much too big for the state of Ohio. I moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I was really desperate for a job. So a woman I knew there said, "Oh, my daughter works at this company and she gets a $250 sign-on bonus if you get hired and stay 30 days. And she said she'd split it with you because she's broke too." And I was like, "Oh, $150, that sounds amazing." Well, as it turns out, I ended up working very unintentionally for a group home. I believe it was a licensed group home there in Minnesota. And I really just fell into this field, and well, here I am. So while I worked there, I had some experiences, obviously, that you ever just have those experiences that just make you so mad and you didn't understand. So one of the men that lived in the home that I worked in was named Jeff. Now, Jeff was a really goofy guy. Like when you got down to it, like he had this best laugh. Like he was hard to get to laugh, but when he did laugh, it was this laugh that was absolutely amazing and worth all the effort it took to get that laugh. Like if I made a fool of myself, it's fine because Jeff was laughing and it was the best sound ever. Well, while I was working there, Jeff passed away. Now, Jeff was what we call complete care. He needed lots of support. He could move his arms a little bit, but not a lot. So any interaction you got was really, you were just judging by his laugh, his smile, facial expressions. But I just love Jeff. And I looked so hard for a picture of him, but I couldn't find one. So I was very sad. So I decided that I wanted to go to the funeral. Now, I am not one of those people that had never been to a funeral. So a side note, both my parents are pastors. So I started going to funerals pretty early on in life. So it was not something I was like not used to. So I was like prepared. Okay, we're going to go to this funeral. It's going to be sad. His parents are going to be grieving so badly that they just lost their son. And oh, it must suck to be them and all this stuff. And so I went, and would you believe that his parents didn't shed a tear at his funeral? And I was just so angry about it. So angry. How could these parents even be his parents? How could they say they loved him? I was so enraged and full of self-righteous anger. So the next year we had another person move into the house, and her name was Evelyn. And Evelyn is what people in the field like to term non-compliant, which automatically made her my favorite person in the world. And she had this very complicated past with her family. Her parents had passed by the time I knew her. Evelyn loved Elvis, everything Elvis. She was working on a book about him. And one night while I was working, Evelyn got very sick. The next morning, she was rushed to the hospital, and she was in the ICU. Now, I ran home and I showered, and I just wanted to go back and make sure she was okay. So I went back to the ICU, and I was standing there while she was not okay. And as it turned out, Evelyn passed away also, right? But while we were in there, I'm standing there in the corner and there was no one there. And I'm a very firm believer, like I just didn't want anyone. I don't think anyone should ever have to die alone, right? So I'm standing there in the corner, and she had a pacemaker. So she wasn't technically dead until they stopped the pacemaker. And her sister, who I had never met, I, worked at this house 40 hours a week. Evelyn and I spent a lot of time together. I knew she had some family still alive, but not. And her sister rushed in, looked at her, kissed her on the forehead, and said, "I'm sorry, I love you. I'm not going to do this," and walked out of the room. And again, I was so enraged, and I didn't understand why. Why would a family member do that? What kind of family member are you? And I just got really mad, okay? So, about 10 years later, still mad, I'm still a self-righteous ass, okay? I saw this article. And so this is the story of parents who sue a hospital because the hospital discouraged them from getting prenatal testing, and they ended up with a daughter with Down syndrome. And they were suing the doctors because had they known that there was a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome, they said they would have aborted. And I read this article and I was just like, this is awful. What is wrong with people? What is wrong with people? Why would you do that? I didn't understand any of this. So they sued for the amount of what they said would be her lifetime care. Moving on, I then heard of the Ashley X treatment. So this is a very, very controversial case out of Washington, I believe. And so this is the story of a family who had a daughter who was pretty severely disabled. The doctor said that she would only have about the mentality of a newborn for the rest of her life. She couldn't walk, she couldn't move. And so her family decided that they were going to stop her from growing, basically. So this quote from the article: "For 3 years from the age of 6, Ashley was administered high doses of the hormone estrogen to bring to a close her growth, and effectively freezing her body at the size of a child's. She was also given a hysterectomy so that she would avoid menstruation, and she had her breast buds removed to escape the discomfort of fully grown breasts." So this went to the ethics committee. The parents decided to go through with this, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. But again, I was so mad, and I read this, and I'm always just like, what is wrong with these families? And I don't know how many of you as providers have said that. I've said it a million times. And I thought, God, I would never do that. I would never do this. I would never do that. Like all of these situations, I just made these judgments on these people, and I thought I would never do that. And then I just decided, once I have my kids, maybe I'll just have a couple kids. Remember, I have 5. I'll just have a couple kids, and then I'm going to adopt all these disabled kids. I'm going to take care of them, and I'm going to love them, and it's going to be great. And so, as fate would have it, on May 17th, 2013, I gave birth to Evangeline Rose, and she was and is the most beautiful, gorgeous kid in the world. So feel free to ooh and ah over this baby picture, because I could just stay here and stare at it for hours. But I ended up, my firstborn daughter has Down syndrome. And so all of a sudden I was thrust into this world of not just parenting. So not only did I become a parent for the first time, which is difficult enough, right? I became a parent to a child with disabilities. And then it all started, right? Medical professionals, they said, "I'm sorry." I had someone who is actually a DD professional say, "Oh yeah, she has Down syndrome. Well, what did you do?" Like, what do you mean? What did I do? Like, well, did you maybe have a couple glasses of wine, or did you drink? And it takes a while. Like, nope. This is what, this happened at conception. This is who she is. and I had to put the friend in quotes because I had a friend, call me up and have this really serious conversation with me. Like, we know you, Sarah. We don't, we don't think you're ready for this type of responsibility. I don't think you can do it. That friend is not really a friend anymore. Family, and I will say this comes, my side of the family actually did say this, that, oh, this didn't come from our side of the family, right? Because, we're pretty superior genes and all that good stuff. I had the question, did you drink? And I'm just like, guys, that's not even how that works. Wrong disability, wrong syndrome. When I was holding my 2-week-old baby, who, as you can tell, I'm quite fond of her. I love her lots, and she's adorable. I had a medical professional talk to me about my husband and I getting genetic testing so that we can make sure that this never happens again, right? We don't want this happening again. This is a defect. This is wrong. This was not said to me, but another parent of a child with Down syndrome, the doctor delivered the baby, put it on the mom's chest, as you do with all newborn babies if you can, and then promptly asked if she would like an antidepressant. And then again, I had another person who worked in this field tell me one day, you're living my worst nightmare. And hearing those things, they can beat you down. Like, a lot of the times I'm just like, okay, let me take this time to educate. But if you ever have had a child and you know how much you're just enamored and in loved, and they're just the most wonderful child that you've ever seen, the most perfect child that ever existed, as my pediatrician kindly says about all my children, which makes me just feel great. To have someone say, like, you're living my worst nightmare, I would never want that. It's hard, and it really starts just like building up, like all these different layers of things that you hear, right? So right from the beginning, parenting a child with disability, you're hearing a lot. Things are being said. So then from here, because I'd worked in the field for a long time, I made a call. Once we got a formal diagnosis, I did make a call to my local county board. So I like to say, welcome to the system. Please keep all hands and legs within the system at all times. This is how we operate, and resistance is futile, for all of my Star Trek friends out there. I am not always good at staying inside a box, which if anyone knows me, you might have guessed. So I only knew to call the Board of DD because I had worked in the field. And so knowing that, I gave them a call, and we got started with EI, and we loved our EI worker. So if anyone ever is in Lucas County and gets to work with Myrna Austin, she is the best. I adore her. She's wonderful. She brightens your day. She's great. And she just loves your baby so much. But as we know, we're entering the system, right? So here I'm just entering the DD system. I'm not really doing much else. And it's so complicated. And I was so confused. And then on top of that, I felt like, why are there all these secrets? So an example of this was, I didn't know that in our county, children under 3 actually got an individual budget and could use that money. I wasn't told that until I was freaking out about needing some sort of therapy piece of equipment or a bed that would be safe for Evangeline, because she was a little floppy, as a lot of kids with Down syndrome are. And so if you put her in a crib, she'd sit up and then proceed to flop all over, kind of like a pinball machine. So it wasn't really safe for her to have a crib. I tried a bed on the floor. She rolled everywhere. And then so finally we found something that worked, and I'm freaking out because I'm like, how do I afford this? Everything is so expensive. That's a whole other topic that we can talk about. Why is everything for a person with disability, or anything that makes anything accessible, so expensive? Why? I'm just going to learn a trade and start building my own things and sell them for a fraction of the cost, and I would still be rich. It's ridiculous. Okay. So I just felt like everything's secretive. Like, you don't tell me about this stuff that I can access until I'm having a nervous breakdown, sobbing, trying to figure this out. And then, going through the questions and going through all of that, and they ask you what do you need? What can't you do? Like, everything just feels really defeating. Like, I'm sitting there in my house holding my baby and just being asked all these questions that either I wasn't ready to answer or I hadn't have actually had been able to process for a really long time. Um, and so it always leads me to questions like, if we're here to support, why do I always feel defeated, right? Why do I dread IEP meetings? Why do I dread having to go and ask for the help or the support that we need for her to live her best life, right? So we started out in one county, we moved around. E is 7 right now, and she has had one, two, about, I want to say 5 SSAs. So yeah, 4, 5, 6. I'm sorry. She's had about 6 county workers between EI and SSAs. So, and every time you get a new SSA, I think we just have to recognize the trauma of that, because every time you get a new person, you have to start from the beginning, right? And you have to start telling the story over, and you have to relive every moment. And then you're like, oh my God, did I forget this? Did I forget that? There's so much to a story, and it's almost like you're just being like forced to share it over and over and over. And I'll talk more about sharing a story in a second. And getting funding, right? So we're in the system. It became very evident that E needed some sort of extra support that we weren't able to offer. And so one, asking for help and recognizing that is hard, because I also like to think that I can do it all. But the fact is I needed help, and there were things that I couldn't have eyes on her 24/7. And that was something that she ended up needing. And so when I went, to the county and asked for help, asked for, hey, can we start looking at a waiver? What are things we do? One of the higher ups actually said, well, we don't understand why you would need paid support when you have 2 parents at home. And so again, that just left me defeated. It left me frustrated. It made me feel like I wasn't enough. So know that any system we enter into this field has a level of trauma and hurt and pain to it, right? And things that are often meant to support, sometimes it's hidden all underneath, but there's so much defeat that happens in there. Part of getting funding was getting every terrible, awful thing that an expert had written about my child, who had met her for 2 hours. And all the things that they said, like, she'll never develop past 3 months. She'll never do this. She can't do this. Just never, can't, won't. And to read that about your child is so hard, especially when that person met them for 2 hours, right? So we entered the DED system, and then we get to enter the medical system. Yay! Another system. So exciting. It's so much fun. And again, they all have things to say. So in 2013, when E was about 4 months old, she started having these really weird, awful movements, and doctor said, oh, it's gas. She's throwing a fit. And so finally one day I took her to the local ER, and I said, you are not telling, I'm not leaving. I staged a sit-in. You are not leaving until you tell me what is going on here, and I need your help, and you need to tell me what's going on. So she was diagnosed with infantile spasms. So, we got to add a neurologist to our team. And so infantile spasms are they're really devastating. And there's a lot that goes into it. One of the best ways to combat it is called ACTH. It's a really high steroid dosage that they give people. And basically the way it was presented, like, there's a 4% chance of death. She could probably die. Or, she's going to have so many of these brain damaging seizures that she's going to end up, quote unquote, a vegetable. Cool. Thanks, medical professionals. I appreciate you. 2013, 50% of kids with Down syndrome do have cardiac issues. E did have a small hole in her heart. Luckily, it did not require surgery. So, we had the cardiologist, though, on standby if needed. In 2014, E was hospitalized for aspiration pneumonia. So a medicine they had given to her to control seizures, actually, she ended up over-medicated, and her body and organs just started shutting down. No big. So we ended up in the ICU. We got an NG tube put in, and after that, she refused to eat anything. And so we ended up with a Gtube placement because of the medication. She stopped urinating on her own. We ended up having to cath her all the time. So we saw a urologist. When you get a Gtube placement, they also give you, kind of a nutritionist. And my experience at that time, still, again, he was probably 1.5 when this all took place. And my experience at that time was just nobody listened to me. I would explain, even with the seizures, I'm like, something's wrong, something's not right. Oh, it's this, oh, it's that. And no one ever made me feel heard until I had to do something drastic. So, that's frustrating in itself. And then they all have these things to say. And we ran into the issue where just disregarding everything that I would say, like, I know my kid, I've known her, since her birth. We've been here. And then just disregarding and the weight of that and how that feels going through that. Into 2017, she had a VNS placed for her seizures. So yay, we get to add a neurologist. So right now we're at, a GI, a urologist, a nutritionist, a neurologist, a cardiologist, a neurosurgeon. My girl, she's bougie. She's got to have all the attention, I swear to God. And then 2018, 2019 came around, and she ended up getting very, very terrible pneumonia. It was touch and go for a very, very, very long time. So she ended up getting a tracheostomy. So again, words, the things that people tell parents. I was told when I talked to the surgeon, I said, well, our hope is we can get a trach. It'll help her strengthen her lungs, and that someday she can get off of it. And I don't know if he was having a bad day because I've had more quality interactions with him since. But he told me, a trach it extends the quantity of life and it doesn't improve the quality. She's always going to be in pain every time she moves her head. She's not going to be able to do this. Basically told me that I was a parent who can't let go, and that dying of respiratory distress is considered dying of natural causes. So again, another system, more words, things are piling up, right? School systems. I'm not going to touch long on this because I'm still in the thick of this right now and it is too fresh. So as far as the school systems, so you go in and, you have IDEA, you have the IDA, and it's the least restrictive, inclusive setting, right? But that's not actually how it works. Apparently in the school systems, they're inclusive. That's not even the right, integrated. Okay. Integrated is the word they use. They're integrated because they house students with disability in the same building. So I ran into the case where E didn't get a preschool graduation. And when I called and asked about it, I said, is this because she's in, what's called the special needs class? And they're like, well, since integration, we don't have the room for things. Okay, so she just doesn't get a preschool graduation. Like, I'm looking at all these pictures. I thought I was the bad mom because usually it is me being the bad mom, and I forgot. But no, they just didn't have it. And then IEPs, I don't know if any parents are on here who have children in the school system with disabilities. IEPs are just the most painful, awful thing in the world. Again, just dreading going in there, and it's okay, we're working on these 3 goals because that's what she's supposed to do, or this again is what is wrong with your child. And so I still struggle with the school system due to COVID. She is virtually learning, which she actually likes better than I anticipated. But she's owed, from the time she was sick, it wasn't safe to send her to school, and she's owed just hundreds of hours of home instruction, and they can't get anyone. And so the school system is frustrating and trying to navigate it to the point where after so long, I have emails with them telling me she's not an appropriate fit for this school. We include our kids with disabilities. Sometimes they can stand at the door and wave, which I had very strong words about my child not being a mascot. Right. She deserves better than that. So I still have very active fights with the school system. And I'm, teen years as we go in, we do know that there is some job development. But as providers, I know a lot of providers have really great great relationships with their school systems, and I'm excited to see how things can change in the coming years with that. So it all adds up. And I had this light bulb moment, okay? Let's go back to Jeff. I remember, and I was too mad to really listen, but in my head, I remembered, after going through all this myself, I remembered a staff saying, in regards to his parents, that I was so angry at because they weren't crying enough for me. I was so angry at them. And she said, you don't understand how many times they've lost him. Jeff was not supposed to survive birth. He died many times. And because he had such a complicated past, the parents had gone through grieving so many times that when it actually happened, they'd been there, they'd grieved, they've processed those feelings time and time and time again. And after watching my own child come very close to death, turning lovely shades of blue a few times, it dawned, right? I've been grieving. We've grieved. It's happened. And I can feel that. And not saying that I wouldn't be devastated, because like I said, I love the crap out of that kid. So it just started dinging. And then I thought of Evelyn and her sister, and I was so mad, right, that her sister couldn't stay there. How much hurt did her mom experience, right? And the trauma, and we're just finding so many new things out about trauma, but how many hurts did she experience from having a disabled child? And it's not the kid's fault, ever. It's society, right? How much trauma had she experienced because the mom had experienced it and she had experienced, or maybe like the frustration was taken out. Like, it's hard to parent multiple kids. It's hard. And there are some times where it gets frustrating and, don't you understand? I can't help you right now because I have to take care of this child, and a feeling of jealousy. And so like, that's something that my husband and I have tried really hard to do. Like, it's never like, well, we can't do that because Evie can't do that. Like, we really try and navigate that and give everyone a really good experience. Cause I don't want, we don't want your kids resenting each other ever. And for the parents who are suing the hospital, I remember that someone mentioned, gosh, it just really makes me sad. And I'm like, yeah, right, that poor kid. And he's like, no, it makes me sad for those poor parents who don't have the support and they don't have what they need to feel that they can give her a successful life, or to feel like it's not always a fight, right? And here's my light bulb moment again. Oh my gosh, I feel like it's always a fight. Yes, I could see if I didn't have the support that I have, or if I didn't have the knowledge that I have, thank God, I could see where you would just be angry, right? And even with the Ashley X, so the Ashley X case, I still really struggle with. I struggle with it a lot. And morally, philosophically, I would never back that, right? But in trying to understand a little bit, the mom in an interview said that, one, she was terrified of not being able to take care of Ashley. She was terrified that she was going to grow into this woman and have all these needs, and she wasn't very big in stature, and she wanted to be able to take care of her for as long as possible. She also stated that she was worried about how her community, how public would treat her if she was a baby-like adult, if she didn't look like a kid, because right now she's still cute, right? What if it's not cute in the future? And just all these fears and fears and fears. And so while that whole case I do have very strong feelings on, again, a light bulb went off. God, look at those fear-based decisions that are being made. And they have effects and they have consequences. So with every system that we enter into, another layer of trauma is added on. For me, telling our story, which is funny now because I'm sharing our story, every time that I told our story, it hurt. And I'm tearing up and I can't get through it. And I'm like, oh, I don't want them to think that, I'm hiding something, or I regret something, or that it's her, because it's never, ever been her, right? every time I told my story, it just felt like another punch in the throat, another punch in the throat. And I had such turnover in supports that I'm telling my story multiple times a year. And then I realized that there's a difference in being forced to share your story and then choosing to, right? And so being able to choose the way and the time and the method of how I share our experiences, that empowers people. So if we're forcing people to do it before they're ready, if we're forcing them to do it when they don't feel that ownership and empowerment of their own story, we're adding trauma. And it all creates fear, right? It creates fear until we get to the point where parenting a child with disabilities becomes a burden. That's how society sees it a lot of time. Like, how, I don't know how you do it. Not well. Parenting a child with disabilities, it turns you into a superhero. How many times have you seen a parent with a child and be like, oh, super mom, you are super mom, you're super dad. And here's the case, people, the human body, the human mind has this amazing ability to adapt. It's how we've survived this long. It's evolution. It's just part of life. And if we cannot fight change long enough, you too can adapt to whatever you need to. So like the whole I could never do it. Why? Is it not worth doing? It's worth doing. So you could. If you could adapt, you could do it. I like to tell, and don't get me wrong, I love flattery. Like, my love language is like words of affirmation. Publicly is better. I tell my spouse. So he's like, I love you. I'm like, oh, well, did you tell the world that? Come on. That poor man. So like, I'm not, flattery will get you everywhere. Compliments help. But the truth of it is at best, I'm a mediocre parent, and that's probably on my good days. But then also that fear, it just piles up until parenting a child with disability turns you, you can be a superhero or you can be a villain in the same thing. Think back, providers, how many times, and we'll talk about this more, how many times have we said, that mother. Words have power. So if you've ever heard me speak before, I apologize because there's certain quotes that I will use in every presentation until the day I die, and this is one of them. Rabbi Abram Heschel, he has the quote, words create worlds. And I think back to the things that I've heard and how that has shaped or could have shaped, right? The way I viewed my child, the way I supported her, the way I took care of her, if I chose to take care of her. And then as a provider, I've said, and as an SSA, I've said all of these things, right? And, if you have, let's just admit it, right? We've said these things. It's so sad. God, it's so sad how the parent holds them back. And I've actually said this, so I will admit and repent. I hate to say it, right? But that guy will be better off once the controlling parents are gone and he can live his life in freedom. Oh, we'll be so much better off. I've learned that anything I start off with, I hate to say, I probably need to not say. Just shut up, Sarah, don't say it. Again, that mother, I had parents who, again, I was so angry with because they had just said, come in and said, there has to be a place in the world for our child, and it has to be here in this sheltered workshop. And I got so mad because no, the place for your child is out in the world, not just stuck in here. But for them, that was revolutionary, given their age and the things that they'd been through and seen, for them to have a place. And so understanding that, and then, my favorite, their parent sabotages everything. And I have to put in here, what would trauma-informed care say about that, right? There's no such thing. That's a myth that people are purposely sabotaging things. It's a trauma response. So again, how can we look at this and the things that we're saying and we're villainizing parents or we're putting them on pedestals? They're parents. And they have a child. And the words that we say can help the atmosphere. And I'm not talking like weird secret stuff, like The Secret, like speak this into existence, but there are power. Hearing things has power, the words you say. So all this, which I kind of have summed up, the systems we operate in, the society we live in, and the way we think of parents and caregivers breeds fear. This all breeds fear. And all of these things create fear in parents and then shames them for the way that the fear is expressed, right? Anxiety, anger, overprotecting, controlling, or even freeze, right? Have you ever been, oh, that parent can't make any decision. I'm froze. I'm in a trauma response. I don't have my brain online yet. But all of the things that I talked about, all these systems that we are operating in are deficit-based. They create this fear, they create this trauma, and then in turn, we then shame and blame for how they're responding to that trauma that our systems created, that our societies created. So for me, my whole mission in life is really changing the narrative and kind of what that looks like. So for some of the professionals or those assessments, how do we move from deficiency to ability, right? How do we say, what can't they do? What can't they do? And to, hey, what can they do? And what things can we support them with to do that better, right? And to focus that and change that. So a lot of that is like, not necessarily like, we have to disregard the whole system and start over, which some days I feel that way. Don't get me wrong. I feel that way. What do we just do in changing our words and our actions to say, yes, I have to get all the information on this sheet per compliance and state orders. But how do I say, so can they do the laundry? Probably not, right? No, probably not. To, hey, how do we think that we could help them succeed in this, or how to do this? Like just changing your tone, changing the way you're asking things, to me makes the hugest difference. And this is gonna sound, you'd be like, oh God, this woman is like some crazy hippie, I swear to God. But the biggest thing it takes, and I loved this from our opening session yesterday, and a couple sessions I was in, I just kept hearing this thing of innovation, imagination. So the biggest thing I need from providers, the biggest thing I need from the professionals in my life, from the systems, give me hope, be my vision, and spark my imagination. And we'll kind of go into that a little bit. Allison Kafer is an amazing disability rights activist from Texas. And she talks about having vision. She has this quote, I desire quick crip futures that embrace disabled people, futures that imagine disability differently, and futures that support multiple ways of being, right? So I think we're getting good at saying, everyone has different abilities, right? I'm not a good baker. Because it requires a level of following recipes that I don't have the patience for, but I'm a pretty good cook because that's really intuitive, right? I can throw a little bit of this in and that. So, I have some abilities that are decent, and I have some abilities that I just should not try to do. But she really talks about this imagined futures, and that's something that's so powerful, and I'll get back to in a second. So it's really important that we have a vision, okay, and that we have that ability to see things differently. Bessel van der Kolk, the need for imagination. Imagination is absolutely critical to the quality of our lives. It is an essential launch pad for making our hopes come true. Without imagination, there is no hope, no chance to envision a better future, or no place to go. There's no goal to reach. And this, for me, is so meaningful. Imagine futures, having hope, being able to see things differently. And I'm not saying don't recognize things how they are now, right? Because if we don't understand how things are now, we'll never be able to change that for the future, right? So I'm not saying ignore how things are now. I'm not saying that at all. But when we lose the power to hope and to imagine, to have these imagined futures, then we don't really have a goal. We don't have something we're pressing for. And maybe it's ridiculous, right? So the most powerful thing I ever did, and I did it, I was writing it and I was sobbing uncontrollably. So my master's is in liberal studies and it has a focus in disability studies. So I was really honored to work with some of the greatest minds in disability studies and get to meet some really amazing people. And Dr. Kim Nielsen, who's an amazing historian, author, she's actually going to law school right now because why wouldn't she? She is just that awesome and amazing. We had this assignment to look at imagined futures and to kind of write something out. And for me, I wrote a fictional account of what I imagined or hoped Evie's first day of high school would look at like, okay? And so I sobbed the whole time because I thought, oh my God, if I could get her to this future, that would be amazing. How awesome would that be? And it was just really powerful to put into words because sometimes we think these things, but we don't put them into words. We don't verbalize them. Words create worlds, right? I have a goal of what I'm reaching for. Now, when I did this exercise, things were different, right? And she has a lot more complicated needs now. So it might be a different future. But it was something that's going to high school on a building that was fully accessible, right? So if you had a wheelchair, if you were a wheelchair user, you could just get in. The doors opened automatically. Classrooms were set up in smaller sizes, like just stuff that I think of that I would love to see at some point in the future. And, her talking to friends and doing things and having a support system there, not having a paid support at school with her or a special aid, just being a student. And it was just the most powerful thing I've ever done in my life. Because a lot of times we imagine the worst. And as a parent, a lot of that fear, I've had parents come up to me like, you don't know what it's like back before I had Evie to pray that your child dies before you. And so I think about our systems, I think about our supports. What are we doing? What are we doing wrong? That we have parents who are afraid their children will outlive them. That's what you want. Outlive me, do great things. And we have so many parents who are so afraid that their kid will be neglected, will not be loved, will not be valued after their death. It is heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. Imagining futures is so vital to the survival of our system, to the survival of people with disabilities. And if you can imagine that future, it can change your perspective and it can give you hope even on the very, very, very worst days. There were days that I was convinced this is it. This is it. This is the end of the road. This is where it stops. But to be able to hope, and sometimes hope hurts. And sometimes having the conversations with those families that we've deemed awful, terrible, sometimes it's hard and sometimes it takes conflict. But there has to be a collaboration. Instead of writing a parent off, there has to be a collaboration. We have to work as a team. I had a staff come to me, and again, he was like, oh God, this parent. Let me tell you about this parent. Well, I've been talking about it with this person and this person. I said, whoa, 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 whoa. I said, you're talking about it with a lot of people. Let's talk about it with her. Let's have a conversation with her and say, hey, this is kind of what we're seeing and this is what we're feeling. What are you feeling and seeing? Can we work together here? Because we're all a team. And I have said this to DODD, to providers. Parents are the most powerful ally you will ever have. And if you want to see real change, rally the parents. Again, who is part of this as providers, as county board or caseworkers? We're all part of it. We have to be a team. We have to be there. Something I really like about the county board system is that is something that has the ability to touch a life from birth to death. And that's an amazing privilege. That's so awesome that they have that ability. So how can we get that system moving better? Providers, what are we doing? How are we supporting families? And I know that a lot of times providers are often seen as like the allies to supporting families, right? But what are we saying and what are we doing and what are we contributing to in a system that adds to the trauma that parents face? And again, this all reflects on how we treat our kids, right? We're all a part of this. that's really all I have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. This is my family. There's my Evie girl. Like I said, we have a big family, and she's just part of the kids, and I love it. And we have great neighbors. That one picture was at a neighbor's birthday party, and I don't know if you saw it. Let's go back to it real quick. Do you see how happy that girl is? Because she doesn't have to be the center of attention, and she doesn't have to she just gets to be there. Like, just being there and being interacted with, you would have thought it was rocket science. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Maybe. Oh, probably. Okay, I think we're good. So I don't know if anyone has any questions, or I can try and read them or answer them. If not, I try to get done just a little early because I tend to overtalk. Shocking, right? Thanks, Emily. Melissa, you have 6 children. That is awesome. I did get, so just to speak to Melissa's comment, so she was saying that she has 6 children and that she got shamed for not genetic testing. So we made a choice very early on that my husband and I would not get genetic testing. I knew that I wanted more than one child, right? And so we were like, we are not getting genetic testing. And we also refused genetic testing for the other 4 children. And there is a lot of shame in that. The fact that why wouldn't you don't have to do anything. You would just want to know. Well, I know the stat that out of women who get genetic testing, 92% are pressured to abort if the fetus has a disability or specifically Down syndrome. So that doesn't mean 92% of people who would be born with Down syndrome are aborted. I think only about like 60 to 70% do genetic testing, but that's not something, and if that's your jam, I'm totally cool with that, but that was not something that I personally felt comfortable with. A lot of things can be found out at the 20-week scan, so. But yeah, don't let people shame you into that. That makes me sad. All right. Well, if no one has anything, again, thank you so much. I love getting a chance to present. I love sharing pictures of my squishy little girl. And if anyone ever has any questions, I'm pretty sure my contact information is somewhere. Feel free to call me, email me, whatever. I do a lot of work with new parents. I've had people call me who say, hey, I just got a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome. Should I be freaked? And my questions are usually like, oh, congratulations, you're pregnant. Did you want to be pregnant? And they'll say yes. I say, congratulations, you're pregnant. Did you want a kid? Yes. Congratulations, you're going to have a kid. So that's how I start out a lot. So I do a lot of work with parents. I also do a lot of work helping parents navigate the system, which is hard for me. And I'm in the system. Guys, we got to do something. Got to do it. So anyways, yes, thank you. And thank you so much, guys. I'm really happy that I was able to be here, just in general, just feeling happy. So Scott, I will stop sharing if you are good to go. Thanks again.